I just started, Travis.
Only take a second.
A second. Everybody is watching me right now, and they just said Debbie is late again. Good morning, everybody. Come here. Sit down. Good morning, guys. I have to take my husband's blood pressure. Hang on. Not that he couldn't do it himself.
You always do.
Okay, we are on part 8 of the Robert Bardo murder trial. Oh, what did I do? Oh, good. I didn't. I thought I lost it. I was trying to find recent pictures of Robert Bardo, which I could not find any. Not even, like, pictures from him in prison that were not, like, current, but more recent. I couldn't even find those. Oh, yay! 143/84. Much better.
Okay.
Much better.
Keep trying.
Much better. Okay. So, I couldn't find any current pictures of him, but I did find some of his drawings. Can't wait. Hang on. That is one of his drawings of Rebecca. I mean, it's not too bad. You can, well, I guess if you know it's of her, you can tell it's her. You need to see my shirt. It's fading, but it says Beagle Mom. I got it for Belle. She's my baby. So there's that one, and there's another one. This one actually looks more like her, I think. And then I'll let y'all guess who this one is. I had to look what the article said because I couldn't figure out who it was. Well, it's here somewhere. Any guesses who that is? That's Michael Jackson. He did much better with the Rebecca Schaeffer pictures. Yeah. Yeah. But, I mean, in his defense, he probably looked at Rebecca more than he's looked at Michael. Bardo is currently in Avenel State Prison. It is a medium secure prison with approximately 4,100 inmates and staff. It is 43% over capacity that it was designed for. How do they do that? Like, seriously, how do you put more people in a building that was designed for a certain number of people? Can't they add on to the building? I mean, that's got to be. I mean, it's not the Four Seasons, but it's got to be inhumane to have more people. It's housing. It's not, like I said, it's not the Four Seasons, but it's housing. How do you get away with putting more people in there than the building is designed to house? Why can't they, add on to it? I don't understand. It can't. I mean, you can't be inhumane, even though they're prisoners. I mean, I'm not soft on prisoners, you guys. I'm the least person that would be soft. The least person. The last person that would be soft on prisoners. But I don't. This is why I honestly believe this is why so many people get parole or get probation or whatever, because they don't have room for all of them. Make the prisons bigger. I know. A trap and neuter return program was begun for feral cats that had lived on the prison grounds since it was built. They no longer have the program, but the prison traps cats and volunteers are allowed to pick them up at the prison. Hey, Judy. Hey, Jennifer. Hey, Marty. I thought I saw Wiggles. There she is. Hey, Wiggles. Yeah. And also in his defense, Michael did keep changing his appearance. I'm a huge Michael Jackson fan. Huge. Yeah, this is true, Judy. This is true. Okay, so we are a little over halfway part 2 of Dr. Dietz. Mr. I'm so special. I'm psychiatrist to the stars or whatever. Whatever he is.
Sharon McKay believed that he'd had a crush on Mrs. Morris and that it had gotten out of hand. And she recalled an incident in which Robert's father had seen Mrs. Morris touch Robert on the shoulder in the presence of the father and had responded strangely saying, "Keep your hands off him," even though it had seemed a harmless tap. Again, his writings from that same period give insight into what he was experiencing. And he has there a repetitive theme of being addicted to the radio, addicted to music. In fact, he even likens it to substance abuse, saying, "I use a new drug I named, or Aldous Huxley named, Soma. I use it all the time where it caused me to do nothing. It is music that I constantly escape to. Now I get nervous thinking my tape recorder radio will break. I even get nervous thinking my record is going to get scratched or my tapes will be ruined." Because, of course, to him, that was his calming, special.
Those writings, were you able to determine from those writings, Robert's writings, whether or not he did use music as an escape?
Oh, it's very clear that he did, and he was much taken by it. This was not merely a young adolescent's interest in popular music, that he was taking personal significance from the lyrics of songs. He believed that he could communicate with those lyrics. He often, both in those writings and in his interviews with me, would cite song lyrics as not merely the apropos line to describe some emotion, but as having special significance, as telling him what his destiny was, as giving him insight into what he was supposed to do. And so he would take direction from songs heard on the radio or lyrics. And some of that rises to the level of being what we refer to in psychiatry as referential thinking, in which some event in the natural world that has absolutely no relationship to the listener is taken as meaning that it does have some personal significance or personal relationship. But there is sometimes a thin line in determining whether someone just likes a song or thinks it happens to meet their emotions versus thinking it contains special significance and is giving messages. And in Robert's case, there's a fair amount of the latter there, that he takes it personally in a referential way. And another example of that phenomenon occurred when, having basically forgotten about Samantha Smith, in fact, to help forget about her, he had bundled up the clippings that he had saved about her, because when he's focused on someone, he will save clippings about them, and sent them all back to her, except for one. The postcard she sent him was...
I'm sorry. I have a feeling, and again, I'm not diagnosing, this is my opinion. He sounds like he's a paranoid schizophrenic. But you can't, also my opinion, you can't say that he took song lyrics and thought they were significant, like speaking just to him or whatever, and that he took that a special meaning from those song lyrics, and because of those song lyrics, he went out and killed someone, and say that he was mentally ill and didn't know what he was doing was wrong, when you have consciousness of guilt that he was trying to cover it up. That he said he took the gun because he was afraid he might be mugged, or whatever other things he did to cover it up, or things he said to cover it up. That's consciousness of guilt, which means he knows that what he did was wrong. So I don't think you can use, in good faith, a mental disease defense. Sometimes two things can be true at the same time. But in this case, I don't see how both of those things could be true. And lawyers do this all the time. Well, they have this mental thing that caused them to do it. But no, then they did all these things to hide what they did. Those are two different things. It doesn't jive with each other. I mean, of course, we know in this case he was found guilty, but I'm just saying, they do that all the time and it makes no sense. And the jury's probably sitting there going, why are we even here? Why are we wasting our time on this? Because it's obvious. I'd be mad if I was sitting in on a trial like that. Like the jurors in the Brian Walsh trial. He's pled guilty to disposing of her body. What in the world are they thinking? Like, why are we here? This is just a waste of our time.
Too treasured that he kept and in fact carried with him on the day of the shooting. But the interest in Samantha Smith had waned. He was now interested in Mrs. Morris. And later, though I don't know how much later, when Samantha Smith, who by then had become an actress, was killed in a plane crash, Robert, having not looked at that letter from her, that postcard from her, for a very long time, happened to have looked at it that day, he told me. And so when he heard on the news that she died, he felt responsible for her death. That's referential thinking. I think he caused the death of someone he hadn't thought of in all this time by having read her card again.
Were you able to make any observations concerning Robert's writing style, his approach to spelling, grammar, sentence structure, things of that nature?
Nothing that I think has any psychiatric significance.
Would you continue then, Doctor?
All righty.
Yeah, it was in 1984, that same year as the first hospitalization, that he entered Pueblo High School. And there at high school, too, he received straight A's. And he had a good attendance record. Teachers there, too, learned of his being unusual. A 10th grade teacher named Melissa Wilson Elias had him again in a class for gifted youth, where he did well scholastically but had no social skills. She, too, observed that he was quiet, he was withdrawn, he didn't have eye contact with other students, that he did speak to her about his family but didn't always make a lot of sense when she spoke to him. She advised the school counselor named Penny Danks that Robert needed help badly. And in the spring, after a time when Robert had been absent from school 3 days in a row, the teacher found a note which had been mailed from outside the school that she described as a suicide letter, 10 pages long. And she gave that to the counselor, who had Robert removed to a foster home. The foster home happened to be near where the teacher lived, and so she gave him a ride to school, from the foster home to school, noting that he always ended up back at his family's house. Eventually, that teacher, though not considering him dangerous, backed away from the relationship with him, which of course was prompted in part by her kindness in giving him the rides. Because she thought that he was becoming too interested in her and that she was at risk of his latching onto her because he seemed to be looking for someone to fill that kind of emotional need. The counselor to whom that teacher referred him, Penelope Danks, recalled him as a loner who was very depressed, no social skills, though extremely bright. She remembered the writings, and she recalled that one of the reasons she wanted him removed from the home was because Jeff, she thought, was using him as a punching bag. She, too, did not expect him to be violent, though she saw his depression worsen. She became counselor both to him and to Jeff, and recalled an incident in which Jeff hit Robert over the head with either a crowbar or a metal pipe that led to Jeff being committed. Again, the Bardos, Mr. and Mrs. Bardo, refused psychological help for Robert, saying that there wasn't anything wrong with him. It was on May 29, 1985, that Robert was taken into the custody of the Department of Economic Security and placed in a foster home. His father said that Child Protective Services had removed him from the home on 2 occasions, but that he didn't think that their home life was so poor that it had been justified. And sometime in the summer of 1985, I don't know the date, Robert dropped out of Pueblo High School. It must have been around that time that he was hospitalized for the second time, because it was on June 21, 1985, that he was hospitalized at Tucson Psychiatric Institute. And he remained there for a month until July 19, 1985. There he was described as coming from a pathological and dysfunctional family. The staff members at the hospital thought that his mother and his brother might both be schizophrenic. His mother was thought to be a paranoid schizophrenic. His brothers had numerous police contacts. Another brother, that would be Jeff, had recently escaped from the Palo Verde hospital where he'd been committed. And Robert was this time admitted because of his recent threats to kill himself and his 2 young nieces. As soon as he was in the hospital, he said that he loved his nieces and he would never hurt them, and he made no further threats against them. However, he did talk about the same problems he had revealed in the earlier letters, namely Edward forcing him to steal for 3 or 4 years. The only treatment he'd received between the 2 hospitalizations was that he'd gone to a support group at the high school during the school year, and he'd had 3 visits with a Dr. Ralph Wetmore, but he had not received medication. He had not entered any kind of ordinary ongoing psychotherapy. Again, he looked disheveled. He had blisters on his lips. This time he was described as having serious acne, and his pronunciation was so poor, his appearance so odd, that he gave the appearance of being of lower intelligence than in fact he is or was. On this occasion, his IQ was measured at 111, which again is above normal, above average. Here he was diagnosed both by the psychologist who did a battery of tests and also by the psychiatrist Michael Mall as suffering from schizophreniform disorder. Actually, I realize I forgot to mention the earlier diagnosis. At Palo Verde Hospital, they had an impression, though they hadn't finished the evaluation. In 1984, the diagnosis given had been dysthymic depressive disorder, meaning dysthymic, D-Y-S-T-H-Y-M-I-C, dysthymic depressive disorder, they called it. Dysthymic disorder is the current term introduced in 1980 for what used to be called a depressive neurosis, meaning someone who is sad and depressed for a prolonged period, more than 2 years, but who does not have the signs and symptoms necessary for a diagnosis of a major depression. And the other condition they thought he had then was obsessive compulsive disorder, which, well, I believe what they meant by it at the time was reference to his thinking about killing and suicide so repeatedly and writing about it over and over and having trouble getting those thoughts out of his mind.
And a lot of these psychiatric terms have changed over the years. Manic depressant, blah, 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 blah. They used to call schizophrenia I can't think today. schizophrenia used to be called split personality, which now I know that schizophrenia is different, and they call that, it's dissociative identity disorder, and schizophrenia are two different things, and they used to call bipolar manic depression. So he's going to probably use a lot of terms that are not used today, is my point. So
he never did have the kinds of rituals that his brother Jeff has, where Jeff will jump out the window, run to the street, run back, and do that 10 times. Or Jeff will turn on the lights and turn them off 10 times in a row. Or turn the water on and turn it off 10 times in a row. Or wash his hands 50 times a day while his feet are filthy. That's Jeff, not Robert. Robert did not have rituals of that kind. Instead, Robert had the repetitive thoughts about harming other people and himself. His picking at his lips could be an example of a compulsive habit, but it's not the kind that we would make that diagnosis on. In any event, this is not the diagnosis that was rendered a year later after a more complete evaluation at Tucson Psychiatric, where the diagnosis given was schizophreniform disorder. Now, schizophreniform disorder is a diagnosis given when an individual basically meets the criteria for a diagnosis of schizophrenia, but hasn't been sick long enough to call it schizophrenia. To be called schizophrenia, the symptoms have to be present for more than 6 months. And because that diagnosis carries some major implications about one's future, it is not given lightly, and so other words are available to describe similar symptoms of shorter duration.
You would indicate that it was Dr. Michael Mall who had diagnosed him as schizophreniform, or suffering from schizophreniform disorder.
Yes, as did Philip Balch, PhD, the psychologist who tested him. Dr. Balch verified that there had been emotional neglect of Robert by his parents and recognized indications that his mother had serious psychiatric problems and that his father suffered from alcoholism. His mother had refused family treatment that had been offered by Child Protective Services, just as she'd refused the other services offered. Robert described himself as a loner and complained of the noise in his home, complained of his parents arguing, as he had in his writings. He said that he felt 1,000,000 miles away from everybody, which is a description of a feeling of estrangement from other humans. Also exemplified by a memorable phrase in one of his letters in which he said, "I felt depressed like a human being." He felt at that time that he was being followed by cars that were out to pick him up and kidnap him, which is a paranoid symptom, and he does not always or even characteristically have paranoid symptoms of that kind. The MMPI profile, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory results, were consistent with what was described as, quote, the distress syndrome of depression, anxiety, and nervousness, as well as strong obsessional characteristics. There is an underlying schizoid nature to the difficulties, end quote. Here, too, he was treated with Navain, the same antipsychotic medication that he had received at Palo Verde Hospital, and his hallucinations cleared during the month that he was treated with antipsychotic medications. He stopped picking his lip. He felt much less anxious with a month on that medication. And in fact, the description of him in the chart is really rather unusual. I get to read a fair number of charts of adolescents through some consulting I do, and they tend to be a real pain in the neck in the hospital. The ones I used to treat were too. They're always challenging the rules, breaking rules, testing how late they could stay out, and all of these other things. He was a model patient at that hospital and was eager for every bit of therapy they offered and fully engaged himself in it. The respite the hospital gave from his home life, I think, may have been a particularly important aspect of that to him. The nursing notes indicate that Robert did say that he felt paranoid. He was afraid of being sexually abused by adults, though he denied that that had ever happened to him. He asked for an antipsychotic medication that he'd had before, Mellaril, but they ended up giving him Navain. He spoke of his aspirations for a career in music. He said that he was going to make everyone proud of him through his music. He discouraged the other adolescent patients from using street drugs. And they noted that he had a tendency to ramble in a monotone when he was speaking. But perhaps the most important aspect of the observations from that hospitalization concern the hallucinations. And so I've extracted from the record everything that was said about hallucinations. And this comes from multiple different observers at the hospital, doctors, nurses, whoever had access to the chart. And here they are. Patient states that he is hearing voices. The voices that sound like they're from God tell him to hang in there. The voices from Satan tell him lies, that he's not worth anything, that things will get worse. Another patient stated he does hear voices and most recently heard these voices this morning telling him to run away from his foster home. In other words, he was having what are called command hallucinations that give him orders. Another patient ran away from his foster home last night because the voices told him to. Chief complaint when he was admitted, I hear voices, a good and a bad voice, telling me to hurt others and to hurt myself. Another observation, the voices usually don't upset me, but they do distract me. Yet again, patient complained of auditory hallucinations, paranoid type of 3 months duration. Now note at Palo Verdes a year earlier, he'd said he always had them. Here they're saying he's had them the past 3 months. Remember that he was partially treated at Palo Verdes with a week on antipsychotic medication. They don't usually respond that quickly, and I don't know if they did respond because in his writings he talks about these warring factions in his head too. Patient complains of 2 different voices speaking with him. Yet another entry. Patient states after awakening from nap earlier in shift that he was having auditory hallucinations and was finding it hard to get rid of voices. Someone else notes, patient states last evening he had to concentrate on keeping the voices away. Again, patient admits to auditory hallucinations of 2 months duration with suicidal and homicidal references. Actually, that one may have come earlier. I don't know that I have these in chronological order. Patient is having auditory hallucinations, but is only hearing the good voices telling him to hang in there. Patient states he still hears voices sometimes, God's or Satan's voice. Robert admitted to hearing voices starting around 2 months prior to admission. He stated there was a good voice and a bad voice. He stated that his bad voice, which is someone outside of him, not his own voice, tells him to do destructive things like hurt other people or hurt himself. Robert stated that the good voice encourages him to do well. Robert admits to having active auditory hallucinations in the hospital. Yet another observer, Robert acknowledges having auditory hallucinations. Consistent with file material, he indicates that there is a good voice that he hears that tells him to keep strong, and a bad voice which shows him logical ways to do crimes, kill himself, etc. He says that the bad voice tells him how to hurt people, kill people, and engage in massive slaughter. He indicates that in response to these voices, he goes to sleep and tries not to think about it. He also reports visual hallucinations with some cue to the perception of seeing people and animals when he looks at the walls. That's the only reference to any visual hallucinations. Well, there are things that can make it difficult to determine if a reported experience of hearing voices is a genuine one or not. And there is a way we go about trying to determine whether patients' reports of voices are genuine or not. This record is a very compelling record that at that time he was having auditory hallucinations of a very particular kind that occur only in psychotic mental illnesses and that are characteristic of schizophrenia, though that isn't the only illness in which such symptoms occur. I considered the possibility of whether that was malingered, did he pretend it, did he learn it from other patients, and so on. And I don't find evidence to support that hypothesis. I believe that he genuinely had that symptom at that time. Now, he, on the other hand, tried to persuade me that he doesn't have voices, that he...
So lazy schizophrenics are safe then. They won't hurt you because they're too lazy to listen to do what the voices say.
He never heard voices, that they're only his thoughts, that there's nothing wrong with him, that he's really okay, and that he didn't want a mental defense. He didn't want anyone to think he was sick. And so what he later told me about this experience that is probably hallucinatory is not like this earlier account, but he was then 14, and I believe that this is an accurate portrayal of hallucinations at the time. That same hospital record mentions that he had thoughts of suicide and homicide. Then he did speak about the allegations that he felt like killing his niece. He admitted to some self-abusive behavior, referred to sticking the pen into his left wrist when he was in Maine.
Uh-oh, Judy's slipping. I just sneezed twice and she didn't say bless you.
He reported having thought of taking his pills or slashing his wrists, and he acknowledged that he made some gestures on 2 occasions in that regard. The one was the December 83 pen in the vein incident. The other was that he now said that in February 84, he took aspirins to harm himself. Again, a social worker assessed the family, this time Kurt Homan, Homan, who described that Mrs. Bardo in that family interview session wouldn't reveal her first name and wouldn't remove her dark glasses, consistent with the hypothesis that she was paranoid. And this is as good a time as any to point out that there are a number of observations to lend support to that concern. It is not a diagnosis. I'm not prepared to make any diagnosis of her. However, Robert's comments to me about her description. And, I neglected when I was saying what I relied on to mention I did do a telephone interview with the parents, with Mr. and Mrs. Bardo, for about an hour. And from that conversation as well, it was clear to me that there is mental disorder at work, and most notably a phenomenon in which she jealously accuses her husband of attention to other women and will make such accusations if he looks at a woman in a grocery line. He's not allowed to leave the house alone because he might have a car crash or he might have an affair, so she always has to accompany him. She's very difficult to understand, even when one can make out the words, and she is highly repetitive and very unusual. And this has been observed by all the professionals who've dealt with her over the years, all the mental health professionals. And I don't think there's any question that Robert comes from a home with some serious mental illness.
All right, it's 3 o'clock. Ms. Ramirez, are you going to switch recorders now?
I but
I think it's back there. In the back row. Is it time?
It's been.
All right, we'll have the afternoon recess, ladies and gentlemen, 10 minutes. Are you on the brink of playing that tape or not?
I don't know.
But what I'm going to do is point out some things that I think are particularly significant in view of the case as a whole, realizing that he vacillates wildly during this period and writes about many mundane things in addition to these more dramatic things that I'm purposely selecting out. There was a cluster of materials that have the dates out of sequence, and so this first batch doesn't really correspond well to the chronology, but they're all from early 1984. It's plain that he had some communications made to a teacher that are of the sort one would not ordinarily want to send to a teacher. They use foul language, they say hostile things to the teacher, and that he refers to himself often with respect to movies that he's at least heard about. In fact, at one point he says that he only pretended to see the movies. He wasn't really allowed to see them, but they sounded good to him. He signed one of the letters, James Bond. He refers to himself as Dirty Harry Callahan. He says he's feeling like Scarface, and refers to that genre known as action movies quite often in these writings.
He wasn't allowed to do that.
He writes, "I will fight because I'm evil." This is from January 26, 84. "I feel that if I get pushed around, I will kill. Right now, I feel I'm writing to God. It seems like I'm angry all sudden. When I write to myself and feel like I'm talking to God. As evil as I am, I feel like I'm talking to the devil." Now, this is an extraordinary thing for a boy who's just turned 14 to be writing. The intensity of these emotions, the juxtaposition of feeling that he's writing to God when he writes to himself, that he's writing to the devil when he writes to himself, is entirely consistent with what the hospital was to observe a year and a half later about his hearing voices that he attributes to God and the devil, that both these things are within him. And so I think it's plain from this letter alone that whatever that is, that I believe to be hallucinated experiences, was occurring to him in January of 1984. And indeed, it was reasonable to suspect that it was occurring when he made his first approach to a celebrity, Samantha Smith, a month earlier. He writes 30 minutes after that, "If I could get music classes and drama classes, then I might reach my goal in life." What a switch, what a transition. He thinks he's talking to the devil and to God. He feels angry, he overdoes it. He's writing about violence and how angry he gets. And half an hour later, things would be fine if he could get in the classes he wants. That's the kind of emotional vacillation I was referring to. He talks about the movie Rocky and how it could explain his fighting, his surviving. "Now I don't think I'll be as violent. I might grow up hating violence. I think I'm changing now. If I hate violence, I'll still like Dirty Harry. I like Clint Eastwood movies. I like the James Bond movies." He's having a transition in his subjective experience, even as he writes this single letter. Started hostile, felt things would be better if he could get the right classes. Now he thinks he's getting less violent, but he continues. "Before, when I was writing, I was evil. Now I feel good and feel like making people happy. Most of the time I think about the girl who went to Russia during the summer, Samantha Smith. Even though she's younger than me, I feel that I like her. Not too many people are like her nowadays. I spend most of my time thinking about her." That's significant to me because we observed in the research on those who pursue celebrities that if there are characteristics of the celebrities that are associated with how often they get pursued, it has to do with this niceness, perceived approachability, how accessible they seem. That if they seem sweet, nice, girl next door, lovely, they will attract a larger number of stalkers, pursuers, mentally ill letter writers per unit of fame than if they are mean, nasty, unattractive, remote, unapproachable. And so for Samantha Smith to appear sweet and nice and the girl next door is a significant attraction to him. He continues, when thinking about her, I feel that I want to become famous and impress her. I feel I'm just someone to her. I hope to see her one day. I hear she's an intelligent, nice girl. I do want to meet her. People tell me to forget about her. I can't because there's always something there to remind me. This is a line from the song. I feel she'll always be a part of me because there is always something there to remind me. For how can I forget a girl like her? At night, I dream of meeting her. I feel I will do something dumb in order to just see her in real life. How do I know if she is just a creation made up by the government to make people happy? That is not a normal 14-year-old's thought, to believe that this famous person is a government invention to make people happy. And he has an equally schizophrenic-like bizarre thought on the same page where he says, how do I know if the table and paper before me is just a field of electric pulses? How can I be sure if this is reality?
I thought for sure he wasn't going to get a new trial. Because I didn't hear anything and it was supposed to be back by April. So, when are we going to know? I want to know, because if he's going to have a new trial, we are definitely covering it. Because we did we did the hearing for the new trial, and then we went back and did the first trial. I definitely want to cover it. Because what did we decide? I forgot. We decided it wasn't an accident, like he said, right? But, yeah, if he gets a new trial, I definitely want to cover it. Same with Murdaugh. Yeah. Why is it taking so long? Same with Alex Murdaugh. We didn't cover the first trial, but if he gets another trial, as much as I think Murdaugh's guilty, I think he deserves a new trial. I still think he's guilty, though, but I think that Becky Hill screwed up his trial. Even though the jurors were like, oh no, nothing she said influenced us, I still think he needs a new trial because she tampered with that jury for darn sure.
Continuing, I don't want Mrs. Morris to hate me. I like her very much, and when she sees my writing, I feel she hates me. Paranoia? I don't think so. His words. He's made the transition here from Samantha Smith to feelings of unreality to wanting Mrs. Morris not to hate him because he likes her, but he's afraid she might hate him. His affections are drawn to those he sees as non-threatening and accepting. He's drawn heavily. He can't stop thinking about them. Yet at the same time, he has ambivalence. That is, he has contradictory emotions toward this object that attracts him so. With respect to Mrs. Morris, there's the positive attraction and his affection for her and how much he likes her, how nice she is to him, yet at the same time concerned that she'll hate him, that she'll think ill of him, and his threats toward her. Two contradictory emotions held simultaneously that in the mind are flipping back and forth. It's like a toggle switch in which he can toggle back between the two emotions instantaneously. In the same piece of writing, Before I talked to anyone, I felt that when the lights go out, it's always the same. You probably wouldn't understand that last statement unless you listen to the music of the band Naked Eyes, my favorite group, which is clean. He talks about the various bands that he likes. Billy Joel came out with a song called Uptown Girl, and I feel Samantha Smith is my uptown girl who lives in an uptown world. Again, the significance of music lyrics to his personal life. He writes that he feels different from other people. He writes that he can no longer concentrate as well as he used to, that he's sleeping 15 hours a day, that he likes to be alone. The eastern United States is very nice. I could write music there with ease if I knew how to write and read music. That's because he wants to be in Maine, where Samantha Smith is. My goal is to become an actor, singer, and successful. I would like to become famous and rich. Right now, I'm nearly poor and not famous. I think that Andropov's comparison of Samantha Smith to Becky Thatcher, Mark Twain's Tom Sawyer, is correct. I think Samantha Smith is solid America. I think of those old-fashioned American girls, and Samantha Smith fits well. She is blue-eyed, smart, intelligent, her hair is long, and that reminds me of the old-fashioned American girls. She lives in Maine, which makes me feel that she's just the old-fashioned American girl. I like the old-fashioned American girl. She fits with Jackson Browne's song, "She's got to be somebody's babe." Everyone at Samantha Smith's school seems to like her, and Jackson Browne's song seems appropriate. If I ever see her, it would make me feel lucky. Hoping to see her in the future and getting her to like me is the challenge. A very hard challenge. It seems to be the challenge of my life. Well, almost. These are the same sentiments at age 14 expressed toward Samantha Smith that he was later to feel toward Rebecca Schaeffer. And that is in keeping with an observation from our research that those who pursue one public figure are at very high risk of doing the same thing to another public figure. If, as has now been recommended repeatedly by those of us who work on this phenomenon, there had been a clearinghouse for such information in December of 1983, he would be on computer as one of those people who not just writes to, but
people keep rewriting what happened. Like, loophole lawyer. I watched one of his videos the other night, and his theory is that John never went in the house, that Brian Higgins attacked him as soon as he got out of the car. Like, he walked, well, not as soon as he got out of the car, but that he walked towards the house and then attacked him right outside of the garage, so that he really didn't go in the house. He doesn't think that Jen McCabe had anything whatsoever to do with the cover-up. I disagree. That woman was too hostile on the witness stand to have not had a hand in it. Somehow. I'm sorry, but I disagree with his assessment. But yeah, everybody is rewriting it. Of course, we don't know what happened in the house, but no one is gonna be happy. Like that, he's on Kieran's side, and he's rewriting what happened. We simply don't know. We don't know. But that is BS. That's BS. Because we know they found her not guilty. Because they found her not guilty. Because the science proves that he wasn't hit by a car. Jeez. Stupid people. Science. Science is our friend, people. Science. Science doesn't lie.
Purposely pursues, goes after for a physical encounter with a public figure, because it was known to authorities in December of 1983. He writes how he likes hearing music and looks up to various singers whom he names. And then he says, "My addiction to the radio scares me. I feel like I'm in a shell and never can get out when I listen to the radio. Even though I was told it's okay, I still feel scared. I feel I overdo it. I can't do my homework because of it. It seems I never learn the things I'm supposed to. I get involved in the radio. I might die from this." He's aware that this is excessive and that it's interfering with his responsibilities in life. That's one of the distinctions that clinicians make to try to be able to recognize whether
Is it that Jennifer Cavender, whatever her name is? Is it that one? She makes up all kinds of crap and posts it on X. If it's coming from her, I know it's not true.
someone has a preoccupation that is pathological from an interest. Many people collect things, for example, and one measure of whether collecting is pathological or not is whether it's interfering with their engaging in the ordinary responsibilities and activities of life. If collecting matchbooks is detrimental to one's marriage and friendships and social relations and career, it has reached that stage. Well, he recognizes here that his listening to the radio is already excessive at 14 and that he's overdoing it. It's interfering with what he's supposed to do in school. Last year, I didn't miss a single day. I made the honor roll last year for every quarter. I improved from 3 A's and 3 B's to 5 A's and 1 B. Now I'm getting C's. I feel this year is really screwed up. Complains of not making the honor roll, having more absences. His standards for himself, as the teachers noted, were perfectionistic, and he's not living up to them, and he's concerned about this decline. Then he talks about keeping his jacket on in class, because when he's told to take it off, he doesn't, and he wants to explain that he feels shy when he takes the jacket off. He can't tolerate the feeling of having it off. Speaks of his dreams of success, though he never does anything to get to it. Talks about his habit of picking his lips and how he's done it for years, how he wishes he could dress better, but he doesn't have the money. People make fun of him because of the way he dresses.
Okay, who wasn't making fun
Every time I hear someone or something mention Maine, I have this weird feeling inside me. I like the state. Arizona gives me nightmares. I love the state of Maine. It's beautiful. Samantha Smith lives there. She lives in Manchester, Maine. The state is nice. She's nice. I feel that must mean something. In other words, his perception is that because she seems nice and the state seems nice, there must be some special significance, something significant to him. This is autistic thinking. Many people have heard the word autism with respect to children who do not communicate, but another meaning of that since 1898 is as a kind of thinking that occurs in schizophrenia. Eugene Bleuler, one of the first people to describe the illness of schizophrenia, described it as a condition characterized by 4 particular symptoms, one of which is ambivalence, these shifting emotions and holding conflicting emotions toward a single object. Another is auditory hallucinations. Yet another is the disturbance of affect, the flat affect that you will come to see Robert Bardo has with inappropriate emotional representations. And autistic thinking of the kind I just gave an example of was one of the other characteristics. Now, this is, of course, not his...
Would be an association defect. I believe you mentioned that
Yes, he also has...
hallucinations or...
No. Did I list 4 or 5 yet, Your Honor?
I wasn't counting, but I didn't hear association defect.
Well, you'll hear it when you see the videotape of Mr. Bardo.
Yes, sir. I'm talking about your description, not what a videotape or anything else.
Yes, sir. He has an associational deficit. as well.
If you want to elaborate.
The nature of defective association is that an individual will have thoughts that do not stay on track, but rather will go off on tangents and will be difficult to follow. In my first day of interviews with Mr. Bardo, it was very difficult to follow him all day because he jumped from subject to subject and would frequently go off track. I would sometimes bring him back. I'd sometimes let him roll off track and see where he went with it. He was, however, able, when I structured him and told him just what I wanted him to do, to stay on track much better. In his writings, he is usually able to complete thoughts for a whole paragraph, though he may then switch to completely unrelated subjects. In his conversations with people over the years, he's been observed at times, and certainly not all the time, to be incoherent or difficult to understand. Part of that is because of his speech. Part of it, at least under periods of stress, I think is related to his associational deficits, that his mental associations between concepts become loose and he goes off track, doesn't stay on his subject. Those loose associations are one of the original features of schizophrenia described by Eugene Bloiler that I referred to earlier. Now, continuing with his writings, this personalized concern with Samantha Smith, this pursuit of her, is the best example at that stage of the autistic nature of his thinking, that he would become wrapped up into a fantasy world about this very special girl who would someday have some relationship to him. And did that while having no friends at home, no companionship, an environment that...
No, but I'm not a cocky SOB that's full of himself like this guy is. I would have just answered the question that the judge asked me.
That he wanted to escape, and parents who resisted efforts by the authorities to help him escape that. Well, the diaries, or the letters go on at very great length. And I think I've been able to talk about most of the highlights. However, there is a large quantity of material in here in which he is threatening desperately to kill other people, to kill himself, to take others hostage, to commit horrendous crimes. He talks about wanting to steal a .44 Magnum to kill the mayor. He talks about wanting to commit mass murder. He alludes occasionally to real criminals and often to movie criminals. He refers often to his special interest in music and in films. And one can even see in his handwriting some of his extremes of emotion, in which when he is most angered or most dysphoric, he will write in larger, bolder strokes, use more exclamation points, and sometimes even take up the better part of the page with the words kill, kill, kill. My conclusion based on these writings from 1984 is that no one familiar with them could fail to recognize that he's a very disturbed young man at that period in his life. Whether from those writings one could have rendered a diagnosis at the time is much harder to say, but they are consistent with the onset around 13 of a schizophrenic illness in which he felt himself deteriorating even then and had at least those acute episodes that led to his hospitalization in 1984 and 1985.
Does that account for all of the relevant or germane material for your opinion as far as what has been termed the Mrs. Moore stage or Samantha Smith stage?
Well, except that when he was discharged from the hospital the final time in 1985, he was given follow-up appointments with the psychiatrist who had treated him in the hospital, and he was given a prescription for outpatient medication, Novocaine, to take. A caseworker transported him from the hospital to the foster home with a 2-day supply of medication. And that's the last treatment that Robert Bardo ever got from anyone, because he was not taken for the follow-up appointments. The prescription was never filled. He never got the medication. And to this day, he remained untreated, but for some post-arrest interventions when he had to be restrained.
What would be the next most significant, psychologically significant?
When he was treated the first time, did they have these writings then? Like, was he writing that he was going to kill people? And they just, like, gave him some pills and sent him on his way? I'm confused. That is really going to be our first March when I start doing March, guys. It's going to be a shirt that says I'm confused. EDB's thing is I have questions. And my thing is I'm confused. Why didn't somebody do something to prevent this? He's writing all these letters or diary entries or whatever they are, asking for help. Why didn't somebody stop this? Why didn't somebody help this kid? This is getting to be sad. This poor guy. I mean, yeah, he knew what he was doing was wrong. Like, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying he shouldn't be punished for what he did. I'm just saying there were red flags here and nobody did anything about it. What the heck? No. And his parents. So this guy just said there were no he was supposed to go for follow-ups and his parents didn't take him. What was wrong? That's child abuse. Like, CPS didn't follow up. CPS was involved because CPS put his brother in a mental hospital. Like, ugh. That's aggravating. I'm aggravated. What is wrong with CPS?
Period.
Well, it was in this state, having dropped out of high school, having been lost to follow-up by the mental health authorities, lost to the school system, lost to the protective services system. No longer seeing Mrs. Morris, no longer fascinated by Samantha Smith by the time he's dropped out of high school, that he first in around August of 1986 saw promotional clips for the series My Sister Sam and first noticed Rebecca Schaeffer.
And share with us your insights then as to the effect it had perhaps on Mr. Bardo, if you can.
Well, this phase of his life then, from the summer of 1986 up until July of 1989, is a story told from several points of view. It's one in which he has told me what occurred. He told others who've interviewed him, that is, in a statement to the police in Tucson and to LAPD, he gave accounts of the nature of his pursuit of her. And it's also a story told from the point of view of collateral witnesses and collateral evidence who have observed parts of that saga. What is the bare bones outline of that saga is that he began to watch the series, developed a special interest in Rebecca Schaeffer and in the series that led him to collect information about her, to begin writing to her, to take as very special the occasion when she answered in her own handwriting his first letter, which led him to write more and focus exclusively on her, and to attempt to visit her 3 times in 1987. His interest in her cooled somewhat in 1988 when he had a fleeting interest in the singer Debbie Gibson, whom he pursued to New York. And he returned in 1989 to encounter Ms. Schaeffer after People magazine taught him how to do it. That is the basic sketch, but there's a lot of detail in between.
Would you share what the court went on during your examination of Robert Bardo?
In the first day of my examination, I had told Mr. Bardo that the evaluation wasn't confidential, that I was there at your request, appointed by the court, that if I were asked to testify, that anything that he might tell me could come out and there would be no confidences, that there was no physician-patient relationship, and he should not mistake this for the expectations to which a patient would be entitled, because this could all become public at his trial. And he understood those things and said that he knew that in advance. He had no problem with the idea that I had wanted to videotape, and I explained that I hadn't been able to bring the equipment in that day. He was wearing a blue jumpsuit that the jail provides that said LA County Jail on the pocket. He told me then and at many points during the interview that he knew who I was. He quoted me. He told me about having seen me on various television appearances and read various articles in which I was quoted, and made plain that he had followed something of the subject matter that he associated with me, namely the pursuit of celebrities. He was eager to talk to me, somewhat pressured. He spoke quickly and gave the sense that he was afraid I wouldn't spend enough time listening to him, and he had to get the story out. He was visibly anxious during that time and had difficulty staying on track. His thoughts would leap from subject to subject. He would frequently speak so quickly that I could barely catch what he was saying, especially things that he assumed I would know about, such as lyrics to songs. He often garbles those and races through them because he assumes everyone knows the same things that he knows. But it was possible to follow what he said about any one subject, even though the interrelations between them were often lost and the temporal sequence was often lost. He told me that he wanted to leap into the story about the shooting itself, and did that, but would drift off to other subjects at times, and sometimes I would interrupt him and ask him about details which would lead to another discussion. The first thing he told me about the shooting was that Ed did not know that he was coming to Los Angeles, which contradicts what Ed had to say, and which is consistent with something that occurred throughout the 2 days with Mr. Bardo, which is he's gone to great lengths to try to protect his brother Ed from Ed's responsibility in this matter, and that he's gone to great lengths to protect his parents. He said repeatedly that he, Robert Bardo, is responsible for what happened, that it's not anyone else's fault, that he's the one responsible, that he doesn't want Ed blamed, he doesn't want his parents blamed, he doesn't want the gun blamed, that it's nobody's fault but his own. And that was a continuing theme. And so I became particularly skeptical of things that he had to tell me about Ed's or his parents' knowledge or involvement, because I know he was trying to protect them. He said that he'd read the tabloid coverage about his offense and smiled, saying that based on that, he even scared himself because they made him sound so malevolent and so horrible. He said that he never had a girlfriend, that he was still a virgin, and pointed out to me what I have come to know is true, quote, "I'm kind of a loner," end quote. He said that it was the commercial for My Sister Sam in 1986 that first attracted him to her, that he first wrote to Rebecca Schaeffer in October of 1986, and then he wrote out for me in his own hand what she wrote on the postcard. It reads, "Robert, your letter was the nicest and most real letter I ever received. The only thing I disagree with is, quote, carry the burden as God, end quote. World peace can only happen if people find within themselves. Please take care." Then there is a heart, Rebecca.
And this was a facsimile of the actual postcard that Rebecca Schaeffer had written to Robert Bardo.
Yes, first he told me from memory what it had said. I asked him to write it out, and he wrote out exactly what he had said, which seems to have a word missing from it, but he said it the same way that he wrote it. And then he told me what was on the other side and wrote that out for me too, which was Robert, then a heart, a peace symbol, and the signature Rebecca Schaeffer. When he received that response, he said it made him believe that she was accessible. He pointed out that he'd heard me advise celebrities not to write to fans and said that he would have to agree. He said that he wrote to Audiences Unlimited and had asked for a ticket, which they sent, but he never got to use the ticket because the show was on hiatus at the time that he arrived. He said, I kind of forgot her for a while until she did another movie. In May of 1989, he saw a magazine photo regarding scenes from a class struggle, and that reminded him of Rebecca Schaeffer. He then read the People magazine article on Arthur Jackson and said that he never thought he'd do anything like Arthur Jackson had done. But when he got to the part about the private investigator obtaining an address as Arthur Jackson was trying to locate Teresa Saldana, he got the idea that that's how he could find Rebecca Schaeffer, because he had tried everything else he knew and had failed, and here was a new approach. He then got off the track and spoke of how when he had been brought to the LA County Jail, a deputy, he said, had threatened his life or said that he wishes he could kill him, and that he reacted with fear, and whatever else he may have done at the time led to Robert being restrained and placed on antipsychotic medication. He mentioned some medicines he'd gotten at that time, but he didn't know the doses or for how long. He mentioned Mellaril, an antipsychotic, Sinequan, which is an antidepressant, and lithium carbonate, which is most often used for the treatment of mania. He also said he was given Navain, the same antipsychotic that had been reportedly effective in the past, but said that that made him twitch, and so he was taken off it because of a side effect, which
Hey, Terry, how's your sister doing?
is one that in fact may develop, but could have been treated with another medicine. He said that he had difficulty believing that Rebecca Schaeffer was dead, and this was a theme to which he returned later and wanted me to tell him if it was really true that she was dead, because he wasn't sure, and he wanted to see the autopsy report to find out if she was really dead, because he thought maybe they had her someplace else to keep her safe, and that it was a security maneuver to pretend that she was dead and charge him, and that this was a way she could be kept safe, and everyone would think she was dead and no one could hurt her. He said that he arrived in the neighborhood where she lived, that he asked a man who was going to a taxi whether the building was an apartment, and the man said that it was. He thought that building had been unusual for an apartment. He wasn't sure if she lived on Sunset Plaza Drive or at this apartment. He had both addresses. So he asked a woman in the neighborhood whether she had seen Rebecca Schaeffer in the neighborhood by showing her the postcard that he'd received from her. He said that he went into an alley in that neighborhood and loaded the gun, thinking that he might shoot his way into the building to see if she was really there. Now, this is one place where he contradicts what he said at other times. In the LAPD interview, he said that he had loaded the gun while still at the bus station. And yet he told me both this day and the following day that he loaded the gun in the alley before having called his sister Harleen. And here he pointed out that the fantasy was that there would be security guards at the building and he'd have to shoot his way in to get to see her. But it was the only way he was going to know if she was there or not, because when he'd gone to Burbank Studios for her, they had not let him get in, and he didn't want to fail again to see her. And yet, hey, he had some trouble believing that she really lived here because the neighborhood and the building seemed modest to him for what he had expected. To continue with his thought, he said that he thought he might have to shoot his way into the building to see if she was there because the security guard at Burbank told him that she didn't want to see him, which sounded arrogant to him. Now, the first time he told me this, he said it as though that were an explanation for something. In other words, the assumption being that, of course, if someone's arrogant, you may have to shoot your way in. We all know that. Of course, that's not a reasonable assumption. And later he gave a full explanation of what this thought is about. He said that he felt frustrated in his efforts to reach Rebecca Schaeffer in the past because she was so important to him. He then mentioned the May 1987 issue of 17 magazine, which he described, which he said described Rebecca Schaeffer as a loner, which led him to feel that he could relate to her. I interrupted.
Is there some notes that the witness is reading from pertaining to the statement?
Yes, the ones you were given at lunchtime.
Are these in the typed version?
No.
These are just the handwritten?
Yes.
Thank you.
I then asked him about his loading of the weapon because I had read from...
She's home already? Wow. That is amazing. Back when I was a nurse, they stayed in the hospital for at least a week. That's crazy. Man, the technology nowadays is amazeballs. Oh my gosh. Oh, thank you. I'm so excited.
The confession, the transcribed confession, that he had partially loaded the weapon, and I asked him about that. And he showed me how, in fact, he'd loaded 5 of the 6 chambers of the revolver and had left a 6th empty, thinking that that would be a safety device in case the hammer were to be struck. He told me that he'd never fired that particular gun before, though he had fired others, that he did not know which direction the cylinder rotated on it. I asked him how he happened to get that gun, and he explained to me that he had gone to see Lethal Weapon 2 with his father and had been much taken by the Beretta Model 92F that Mel Gibson uses in the film. It's highlighted in the posters, and it's the focus of some attention in the movie, and that he wanted to get...
Great job, Dad. Yeah. Let's take the violent son to see Lethal Weapon.
That weapon. He talked to Ed about it, and Ed liked the idea of getting that weapon, but the cost was excessive because the Beretta costs $500 or $600 retail. And so his brother recommended to him that he might buy the Egyptian knockoff instead. I assume he's referring to the Hell Wand because it's the only Egyptian imitation of that, which retails for about $200. And the store that Ed took him to buy the Hell Wand 9mm was sold out, whereupon he saw a pair of revolvers manufactured by Rossi in .357 Magnum, and because that was the affordable weapon at the time, that's what he and Ed decided that they would buy. He indicated that Ed had purchased the gun because he was underage, but he didn't want Ed to get into any trouble for this and continued to try to protect Ed. He then said that he arrived in Los Angeles on July 18 around dawn. And a point of confusion still to me is Robert's descriptions of the state of light, the ambient light at the time he went to Ms. Schaeffer's apartment, because I assume it really was sunlight at the time he first got there, but he sometimes talks about it being sun up or that the sun was just coming.
Yes, it could have been worse. It could have been worse, I suppose.
He says things about the lighting that sometimes seem to contradict each other, and I'm not sure what he's saying about the light. But in any event, he told me that he took the bus to Santa Monica. I suppose that's Boulevard or Avenue, I don't know which, and walked from there to Sweetser, walking south to 120 North Sweetser. After his taxi conversation that I referred to earlier, he said that he went to a diner where he ordered onion rings and cheesecake, which I told him was a very peculiar breakfast, and that if he didn't want people to think he was odd, he shouldn't admit to such things. He said, however, that he could not eat those.
Okay, I'm sorry. Perkins serves anything you want to eat all day long. I could 100% go in there and get cheesecake and onion rings for breakfast. I'm sorry, but I don't think that makes you psychotic. Because I could 100% do that.
Because he felt nervous. He felt too nervous to eat. And then he went into the alley after that, where he partially loaded the gun. It was after that, he said, that he talked to a woman and then called his sister Arlene, saying that he was a block away from the house and was going to do his mission. His sister, he said, told him that if he came to Tennessee, she'd set up an apartment for him, which he said, he quoted his sister as saying, "It's okay to meet her and that's fine, but don't do it." Then he leaped from that to having pressed the buzzer at Rebecca Schaeffer's apartment and said that she came to the door, which surprised him. He expected her to be arrogant. And then he gave a detailed description of how she looked at the time. And when he described her appearance, his face lit up and he brightened and he showed evident joy in describing how she appeared. He said that he had mumbled to her and noticed that she became cautious when he reached into the bag where he had things he was going to give her. And here he said it was still dark out, but the sun was coming out. And then he recounted the conversation that he had with Rebecca Schaeffer, just as he'd done in the police reports that I'd read. He said she was sweet and nice to him, that she wore blush but no lipstick, that she kept smiling, that she kept nodding her head in a yes motion, that she seemed interested in getting back inside, and that he left there happy, feeling, "I've won." He was eager to tell his brother Ed that he'd met her, and he headed back toward the Hotel Howard, where he had stayed before. Then he thought about the fact that he'd sold all of his things to make this trip, his cassettes and CDs, or many of them. He thought about not having asked her if she'd gotten all his letters, which was one of the main things he wanted to know. He debated whether to return to her and talk to her some more. And while debating this, returned to the diner where he'd been earlier and went into the bathroom. He was going to give her a letter that he'd written and brought for her. And here's what he said, quote, "I was thinking she was going to bite my head off or something. I figured there was nothing wrong with it. I was kind of nervous she would hate me. Well, not hate me, but kind of bite my head off," end quote. Those had been his expectations when he went to the door the first time, and it confused him that she had been nice and that he had left so happily. He said that he figured she'd already seen him now, and it was daylight, and she had trusted him before, and he wanted to spend some more time with her. He then had great difficulty staying on the topic, and at this point began wandering all over. And at that point, I told him what I wanted him to do, which was to tell me what the reasons were for returning to see her and what the reasons were against it. I actually asked him if he could recreate the decision he was trying to make at that time. And he said that the reasons favoring going to see her were that he had sold all his CDs to finance the trip, that he had wanted to meet her since January of 1987, that he wanted her to know who he was, in case she got a lot of letters from other people so that he would stand out and be memorable, that he had left that teddy bear for her that cost more than $100 and he still didn't know if she ever received it, that he wanted more time to talk to her, that he wanted to give her the letter or ask her the questions that were in it, or both. And finally, what else does she have to do this early? I asked what the reasons were against going back, and he said, well, he'd already seen her. He wanted to go home. He didn't want to be a, quote, pesky little fan, end quote, and he didn't want to bother her. But he said that he didn't view all of this as a weighty decision about whether to go back or not. Then, when he went back, he said that he saw her in a bathrobe and knew that he had made a mistake. He had the letter to his sister Janet in his hand by mistake, having forgotten that that was in the bag. And he saw that the letter was addressed to Janet when he handed it to Rebecca Schaeffer, whose hair was still wet. She wore a necklace, but at that point did not have the other jewelry on that he described earlier. He fumbled in the bag. He wanted to give her the Joshua Tree album by U2. He wanted to give her the postcard that she had sent to him so that he wouldn't have to read it over and over again, which is what he had done, of course. And he wanted to give her the letter. He said, I thought maybe she didn't like me. It was kind of like a rejection, end quote, because of the way he perceived her at that time. He felt nervous trying to get the things together to hand to her. He mentioned that the gun had never been in the holster during this trip, that the holster and the gun were each loose in the bag. He mentioned then that he wants to protect his brother, that he takes full responsibility for what he did. Quote, her parents lost their only child. I had a gun I had no business carrying, end quote. He said he didn't want to fight the charges because he didn't have much in life. Quote, I didn't have much in life except Rebecca, and now she's gone, end quote. Then he talked about the View section of the LA Times on August 13th, saying that her parents were talking about gun control, namely the Schaeffers. And he said, quote, they seem to want to channel their energies into the gun issue when I'm the one that did it, end quote. And he doesn't understand why the parents want to go after the gun issue. He said that being in jail didn't bother him very much. quote, "I don't demand too much in life," end quote. He would like to be away from the gangs and from the violent inmates. It's a theme he mentioned a number of times about being scared by the other inmates. He said, "I can't blame society, can't blame my family," end quote. Then he returned to the day in question and said, "I felt kind of irritated that I thought she didn't like me," end quote. He wanted contact with this, quote, "pretty friend," end quote, whom he adored. He said that he had romantic, positive ideas and that anything that contradicted the innocent image he held of her upset him. He talked about having looked for clues to her location in all of the media stories and said these celebrities don't seem to realize they basically tell where they live, end quote. He then talked about things he'd read me saying about the subject. He mentioned that the private investigator he had contacted had looked in a Portland phone book. He mentioned that he had at one time called the Tucson Public Library to get Rebecca Schaeffer's father's phone number, and that he called that phone number and spoke to the secretary. He had planned to tell Ms. Schaeffer's father that he was pursuing her, trying to find her. And he knew that her father is a child psychologist. This effort to call the father was in 1988. Then he talked about the Joshua Tree album, which he said had come out in 1987. It's the CD that he had with him in the bag and wanted to give Ms. Schaeffer. He mentioned a song called One Tree Hill that he said was about the death of a friend. He said that he considers the album spiritual, not regular pop music, and that One Tree Hill, the words of that title, refer to an ocean or a sea, which means eternity. And we then discussed the song Exit from that album, in which he interpreted the lyrics in the following way. He said that the phrase in the song, "the hands of love," refers to Rebecca, that is a designation for Rebecca Schaeffer. That the words "cut across the land" mean that have to do with his thinking of Rebecca as he walked to Jack in the Box each morning, cutting across a field. That the words "deeper into black," "deeper into white" refer to his emotional states. That the phrase "howlin' wind" refers to a desolate, lonely place. That the phrase "healin' hands of love" refers to the good part of his feeling toward Rebecca Schaeffer. And that the lyric "pistol weighin' heavy" gave him his idea for the mission.
Your Honor, at this time, I do have some of the lyrics that were referred to from the Joshua Tree album. I'd like to have this marked Defense Exhibit E.
Now we got song lyrics in evidence.
I have the original from which this came, which was a CD cover, and I will make that available, of course, to Ms. Clark.
Oh, this is a jacket, not a cover.
Your Honor, I would like to, at this time,
Okay.
play the one song in question from the Joshua Tree album of U2, Exit.
That song whose lyrics are contained in Defense E.
Yes, Your Honor, primarily from the song Exit.
Is there any need?
May I have pardon me?
I'm sorry, since we have words, and I think that's what the witness is indicating is important, why do we need to play the tape?
Because it isn't
I'd like
just,
to hear how it's played,
Okay.
how it's sung, how the music comes out.
If it wasn't like a practice one, it was play it. Hi, Carrie.
Used to stay away, distract the dreams he had away. Want to believe in the hands of love. Across the land, the dogs fly high, like a broken heart man. Howling wind, the howling wind. What I did in my life, see the
The record should reflect that during playing of the song, the defendant first was moving his head in synchronization with the rhythm of the music. Then, somewhat through the song, he acquired a smile, and his reaction to the music seemed to be more intense. And further, that he seemed to be mouthing the words or the lyrics to the song as they were sung. Anyone notice anything else that I've left out?
I would be interested in Dr. Dietz' comments on that area, Your Honor. The court would allow.
Right, these observations.
Yes.
Let me ask you a question first, because I think there was some ambiguity in what the doctor had said. You said that there were certain events in his life and certain feelings that he equated with the lyrics in the music.
Yes, Your Honor.
Did he ever express any ideas such as the music had been written for him or was being performed by him, for him consciously, by the people who were either performing it or writing it?
It was never that clear, Your Honor.
So it could have been merely a song that he found sympathetic, that seemed to express things that he had felt. In other words, this wasn't necessarily any idea of reference.
Well, there was a great deal of feeling that songs were sympathetic in that more ordinary way. And yet there were times that he made it plain that the lyrics told him his destiny.
Did he ever directly express the idea that the people were writing the songs for him, or the radio station was playing for him?
No,
Or that the performers had him in mind when they were playing?
no.
All right, thank you. Proceed.
Doctor, in any event, there were quite a number of songs wherein Mr. Bardo determined the lyrics to have some special significance and meaning to him, correct?
Yes,
And which gave him direction,
yes.
would you say? Now, I believe you were detailing for the court what went on during this first initial examination. And by the way, before we get any further, did you attempt on the first day to bring in your video equipment?
Yes, I did.
Were you allowed to bring in the video equipment by the sheriff's?
What's the relevance of that? I know why he didn't.
Fine, just long as, that's fine, Your Honor. Would you continue?
Part of the record already.
He told me after describing the meaning of those lyrics that the first effort he made to find, that is to visit Rebecca Schaeffer, had been toward the end of May or early June 1987. And he said that he was even thinking of hurting her at that time because she sounded arrogant in TV Guide, but he wanted to see her before she was a big star. In that trip, he had contact, for reasons that get described later, with Jack Egger, the head of security at Burbank Studios, whom he quoted as saying, "She doesn't want to see you. She doesn't want to be disturbed." In his words, he made her sound arrogant. It just broke my heart. He told me that Jack Egger had his men give Robert a tour of the studio before Jack Egger drove Robert back to his hotel, and that after he was dropped at his hotel, he went out and looked for pharmacies or any place else he could buy sleeping pills, that he bought some kind of over-the-counter sleeping pill, the name of which he no longer recalls, and that he took the whole container, laying down on the bed with the teddy bear that he had brought for Rebecca Schaeffer but had not been allowed to leave for her, that he lay down with the teddy bear to die, and instead woke up now in a bad mood, thinking, "She shouldn't have made me feel this way. It should have been easy," end quote. He went to Hollywood Boulevard and he bought a book called The Love You Make by the Beatles, which had a chapter on Mark David Chapman, the man who killed John Lennon, whereupon he got sidetracked and talked about an interview with me that he'd read in a magazine, and then talked about his meeting with Dr. Stahlberg. He said that he tried to identify with Chapman in reading the initial coverage of that event and in reading this book, and he found some points of similarity between himself and Chapman. They had both been unhappy, both had fathers who were master sergeants in the Air Force, and that he could understand what Chapman did. And then he pointed out, it's amazing that in their effort to make the general public understand how people stalk celebrities, the media teach people like me how to do it. He talked some more about things he'd read about me in various magazines, and then said that in jail people have been threatening him, that he has been trying to act tough and intimidating. And he talked about a diary in which he pretends to be an evil character and that he does try to intimidate people to protect himself in jail. He said he could accept the death penalty, that he doesn't want to have a mental defense, that he resents the inmates who tease him for not having raped Rebecca Schaeffer. It infuriates him when they tell him that he should have done that. Often during this day, he used song lyrics to make his points. He did have either what at that time I couldn't distinguish whether they were loose associations or flight of ideas. He rambled. He often lost his thoughts. He sometimes became perplexed or would briefly seem to block in his thoughts and be unable to find what he was looking for. He then spoke of the bands that he particularly liked, especially U2, Guns N' Roses, REM, and Bruce Springsteen, and said that John Lennon was his favorite Beatle, though other evidence indicated that he was only interested in the Beatles after John Lennon was killed. He again talked about the song Exit that's just been played, and quoted the lyric, pistol weighing heavy, heart beating. He said he thought that's what would happen when he first met Rebecca Schaeffer. Quote, "It's like I love you, but if you're going to be some arrogant kind of person, you're no good anyway," end quote. He read that she cried every night for a year because she couldn't make friends, and said that he related to that because that's the way he felt. As he was describing conflicts within himself, as he described the shooting itself, he was, for the most part, emotionless and had a flat emotional appearance. He said he had expected Rebecca Schaeffer to be callous, but he wasn't certain whether she would be, that he shifted between expectations she would be sweet and the expectation she would be callous. Every day after work, he said he had looked through all the magazines at Abco, which apparently is a chain of stores, looking for anything he could find about Rebecca Schaeffer. And anytime he found something in a magazine about her, he tore it out. In fact, he would tear 2 copies out of 2 different issues. He kept a folder full of articles about Rebecca Schaeffer, and told me that his brother Ed had destroyed that after he was arrested. That Ed and Jeff had also destroyed, he said, the box that the gun came in and a tape of special songs he'd made about Rebecca Schaeffer. The only particular one he mentioned was Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses. He said that after the shooting, he had gone to Parker Center, but he couldn't find it, so he took the bus to go talk to Ed. You'll see this is disjointed, but this is the order in which the thoughts came. He mentioned then that the most important albums were the Joshua Tree album by U2, and that second most were 2 Guns N' Roses albums, Appetite for Destruction and one called GNR Lies. There's a song on this Joshua Tree album with the title Trip Through Your Wires, and he had used the word trip in one of his writings after his arrest, and I asked him about that and whether it had to do with that song. He didn't remember the part he'd written, but said that that song was important because it related to the angel or devil conflict. And then he added, but it's not that I truly believe she was an angel or a devil. He said that he thought that his being in jail was confirmation that he tripped through her wires, just as the song says. And I asked him how he got this interpretation of what that means. He said that a Rolling Stone critic said the song meant that what looks like salvation could be a trap, and he felt that that's what had happened with Rebecca Schaeffer. Then he told me about the song With You or Without You, right? And I'm sorry, it's With or Without You. which is also on that album. And he had heard an interview in which the lead singer, Bono, said that that song was about obsession. And Robert said that he felt that way as well. He said that he prays, but he can't believe that what he's done could be forgiven. If he were going to be executed, he would like to have Mr. and Mrs. Schaeffer present to observe his execution. He wrote a song about missing Rebecca Schaeffer, and then he sang the song to me. He sang the lyrics. He did the percussion line with his right foot and was bobbing up and down and nodding his head and patting with his hands as his head moved up and down, singing the song that he'd written about her.
He had written a song about Rebecca Schaeffer.
Yes.
And in so doing that, he was moving his head up and down and patting his hand.
Yes.
Now, you had occasion to review the preliminary hearing transcript, the testimony of the one Jan Underwood and Deborah Kennedy, I believe.
Yes.
And did you have occasion to read the description that they testified to concerning Mr. Robert Bardo on the day of the shooting?
Yes.
Was what you observed, that type of action, consistent with what those witnesses had described at the preliminary hearing?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. Also, Your Honor, I now have...
Yeah, I think this is a good time to take the evening recess, and let me remind you that tomorrow we'll be stopping at 4:15. I have a lecture to give tomorrow night.
I would like then to mark...
I would urge both sides to be on time tomorrow, though.
What time are
Well, that's what I'm going to look into. I don't know what the calendar looks like. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, so how's it look?
Okay. Yay, that was interesting. Watching him lip sync and whatever that was. Dancing? Was he dancing? What was he doing? He was flopping them fish. Does his ears look straight? I can't get them even. I got one of them's curled over too much. They're still floppy. His head's a little floppy too, but okay. Anyway, that's it for Bardo today. Thank you for joining me. Thank you, lurkers, replay crew. Thank you. We are now going to the Brian Walsh trial. I'll see you over there in a few minutes. Anybody want a beagle? She's mad because we quit feeding her the fresh pet because she's gained all the weight back. And now she just has regular dog food like she used to. And she's mad and doesn't want it. Okay. I will see you over there in a minute.